After the break, our special investigation into a block of flats in Croydon that's said to have the worst housing conditions in the country. See you at 6. Tonight, resignations, accusations of racism and demands for change at the top. The Pride in London row continues. Since its most senior black official stepped down, a wave of walkouts followed. Just how deep do Pride's problems run and what happens next?
I know what it's like to be sitting at the table and being invited but not being asked to dance.
Also tonight, an exclusive ITV News investigation reveals the worst housing in the country in Croydon and talk to the residents whose complaints have come to nothing.
And I don't know if anyone's going to fix it, and maybe we will be homeless because everybody I turn to, no one helps. So
we revisit the pub in Maida Vale, now rebuilt brick by brick after developers demolished it without permission. And back home in Hackney after being crowned world champ. Just days after his win, Lawrence Okoli will be joining us live. Good evening. In the past week, Pride in London has faced allegations of racism, bullying and resignations at the very top. Tonight, in a special report, Ria Chatterjee sits down with 3 now former board members to ask exactly what has been going on and what should be done to rebuild trust. We understand that a meeting over the weekend highlighted the divisions and once again claims that allegations were not being taken seriously. Tonight, there are calls on the Mayor to investigate Pride in London.
My name is Kevin Lyons and I'm the former Deputy Director for Pride in London.
Their former titles tell part of this story.
And I was the former Director of Communications for Pride in London.
One of allegations of racism within an organisation that says it's a home for every part of London's LGBT plus community.
2 people who, had their own personal experiences of racism at the hands of Pride in London called me up in tears because I think there is a feeling of relief.
Last week, 5 of Pride in London's directors resigned, including the 2 co-chairs. There was a meeting on Saturday with members and now further allegations.
Do you know that people felt heard in that meeting, given everything that's happened?
No, I think it was quite the opposite. They weren't addressing it. They were being questioned about it and from all accounts deflecting from addressing them. And I think that is in itself quite hurtful for all volunteers to witness for the first time ever, because then it begins to lead questions as to this is not an isolated incident. This is now a pattern of behaviour. This is a pattern of no accountability.
And you say that some people actually left the meeting?
From what I heard, yes.
And in the 2 weeks prior,
I had a conversation and I came out of it crying because I felt the pain. I know what it's like to be sitting at the table and being invited but not being asked to dance. And to see that there are still some black volunteers and brown volunteers that are there and they're literally pleading, saying, can you please tell us how we can help? Can you please tell us what is going on? Can you please acknowledge what has taken place?
Do you think it was right for all of the directors to resign, particularly the co-chairs? Is there an instance in which there might have been a learning process with the same people, particularly the co-chairs, staying on and actually engaging in a dialogue?
I think we'd had that moment before, and I think that's why this moment was so different and the public reaction has been so different. Can Pride in London really say that that things have changed internally for volunteers, or that they've done anything out and over and above what was happening before? And I think the answer is no.
Is this bigger than Pride in London within the LGBTQ community?
The LGBT community has long historic problems with racism. There's charities out there that have recognised that and are putting in the work. And I think that's really the key thing here, is to say, is not to turn a blind eye to these issues, but to actually recognise them and say, we're aware this is happening and we're taking active steps to change things.
I think there has to be a conversation convened by the Mayor of London to work out what Pride looks like moving forward. Pride in London is so important. Even in the last few weeks, we've been talking about the, conversion therapy and how that's still happening in the UK. We talk about, trans rights. There's so much happening for LGBT people. We need a strong Pride, but it has to be in the service of all parts of our communities, including, of course, people of colour.
Ria, what has Pride in London had to say about this?
So we approached them for comments specifically on the allegations that on Saturday's meeting that members left and there were feelings that concerns over racism still weren't taken seriously. And we haven't heard back from Pride in London on that. But they did issue a statement last week in which they said they wanted to create a more inclusive culture, that they wanted to apologise to volunteers. Well, these fresh allegations about Saturday's meeting would again suggest that there are still issues to address. But as I said, we haven't heard back from them. We did speak to the Mayor of London today, who said that City Hall would also be looking into these allegations.
OK, Ria, thank you. A pregnant young woman has been punched in the stomach by an unknown man in Stamford Hill, with the entire attack caught on CCTV. Images show the woman walking along Manor Road where she was stalked by a man. He then forced a pillowcase over her head, then hit her in the stomach and face. She managed to fight him off and then he ran off. Police have made an appeal to help identify the man. Both the woman and her unborn child survived the attack. Bailiffs moved in this morning to evict 4 climate change activists from a protest camp in Denham Park. The protesters built towers from pallets to disrupt a road that HS2 are building. Activists failed to disrupt them, but they did cause damage to the river and the environment. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
In woods on the edge of London, one last act of defiance. A protester is using a makeshift arm lock to try to foil the bailiffs. But this would be one more battle lost by HS2's opponents. The eviction teams were determined to prize a handful of climate change activists from their towers built out of wooden pallets.
I think it's very heavy-handed. It just shows quite a lot of aggression in terms of how the eviction teams work. So in total, there have been 5 protesters which have been evicted today.
An activist in a treehouse filmed the bailiffs' early morning arrival in Denham Country Park.
Currently it's looking like a potential partial eviction. We used to have 2 towers in the space that you can see, we now have 1.
The protest camp has been a flashpoint between climate change activists and HS2 for months. Construction gangs are building a temporary road through the woods to allow them to move electricity pylons. HS2 has promised to plant new trees, but Marion, a retired teacher from Croydon, isn't persuaded.
Mainly for me it is the trashing of ancient woodland, the refusal to understand that an ancient tree is so much more valuable than a sapling, which is going to take a long time.
Moving the reluctant protesters from the remains of their tower was a slow process. Eventually they were strapped to a mountain rescue style stretcher and lowered by a crane to the ground. The last 2 protesters to leave the tower are now in that black tent with the letters NET on the roof. It stands for National Eviction Team. Inside, but out of sight, the arm lock is being removed. In a statement, HS2 said, "Instead of attempting to delay our work, these activists should clear their unsafe protest camp, stop threatening and assaulting our staff, and stop causing damage to the river and surrounding environment." After today's eviction, some in the camp decided it was time to take the fight to somewhere else.
They've killed all the trees they want to around here and driven through wildlife reserves. All the environmental destruction they want to do in this area, they've successfully done so far. So it's time to move on.
So no point in you staying here?
No, of course not.
But others weren't ready to give up. Tonight, the camp's dwindling community is left wondering, what will the bailiffs do next? Simon Harris, ITV News, Denham.
We're talking about housing now, from the debate over who should pick up the cost of replacing dangerous cladding in light of the Grenfell Tower fire, to an example of awful conditions a group of residents are living in Croydon. So bad, it's been called the worst housing in the country, despite complaints being raised with the council time and time again. So, firstly, Rags Martell has been talking to residents in Stevenage living in a tower wrapped in dangerous cladding.
They live in a tower
that could be another Grenfell.
I have 2 young children, so knowing that, I can potentially die of fire is extremely, extremely distressing.
We basically can't sleep at night knowing that we might be engulfed in flames at any moment.
Vista Tower in Stevenage not only has dangerous cladding, it's missing basic fire safety features to stop the spread of flames. Fire wardens now patrol the building 24/7, but this is extremely expensive, an extra £600 a month for each leaseholder, on top of their mortgage and service charge.
It's a financial stress because we are facing quite a huge bill. We don't know if we'll be able to pay for it, and at the end we might go bankrupt.
Tory MP Stephen McPartland is trying to make sure innocent leaseholders don't pay for any costs of fixing unsafe buildings.
How does it feel going against your own government as a Conservative?
I hate that I'm having to lead the way on this because it's not fair. It's not fair what's happening to leaseholders. It's not fair the government's not listening. It's not fair that we're in this situation. Leaseholders are being punished because nearly 4 years after Grenfell, the issue is not being dealt with.
The government says it's spending £5 billion to remove unsafe cladding. The trouble is, with this building, dangerous cladding is just one of many fire safety problems.
All of the other fire safety defects aren't covered by any funding, and it's the same kind of scale of the problem as the cladding, in that it's going to cost millions of pounds for us to remediate, but there's just no support, and it's nothing that we couldn't have seen when we bought our flat that was going to be a problem.
The managing agent for the building told us they're applying for government funding to protect leaseholders from footing the bill. The estimate for fixing the cladding on this building alone is £10 million.
We've got people who are contemplating suicide, they're contemplating self-harm, they're in real trouble.
This is just one story from the so-called cladding crisis. Tonight, a vote in Parliament to protect leaseholders from the repair bills is expected to be defeated by government. But for these residents and thousands of others, they'll sleep again in unsafe homes, hoping their building doesn't become another Grenfell. Brags Martel, ITV News, Stevenage.
And to Croydon now, and an exclusive ITV News investigation in which we've spoken to residents in a tower block described by one charity as the worst housing in the country. Our correspondent Dan Hewitt has joined us. And Dan, I've already seen some of the stuff that you filmed, and some of it is really quite unbelievable.
Yeah, Charlene, it's not just unbelievable, it's completely unlivable. These are shocking pictures we found. It is shocking to think that people are living in these conditions in 2021, but they are living in these conditions. In one tower block in Croydon, residents have been living in flats with mould, damp, electricity failures, risk of electrocution, you name it. They are living in the most squalid conditions. It is really hard to believe they're living here. They've been complaining about this for several months. They say they've been contacting their landlord, Croydon Council, about this, but nothing has changed. We spoke to Franzoy, who lives in one ground floor flat with her 2 young boys, 5 and 7, and this is what she had to say to us.
I mean, there's only so much I can get angry and get upset and pull my hair out. I just feel like I'm going to kill myself if I continue like that, so I just try not to make it stress me out too much.
You've got 2 children living here.
Yes, I do. I told them the truth. I said, I don't know if anyone's going to fix it, and maybe we will be homeless because everybody I turn to, no one helps, so.
Now, we showed our footage to Dame Judith Hackett, who led the independent review into building safety and regulations after the Grenfell Tower fire. She told us it was the worst housing conditions she has ever seen, but said it was typical of a culture of ignoring people in tower blocks when they raise issues. This is what she said to us.
I heard lots of times when I talked to residents in the wake of Grenfell, when I talked to residents in other tower blocks as part of my review, one of the common complaints from residents was nobody listens to us. And that, I'm afraid, is typical. And that's one of the kind of fundamental cultural issues we've got to get over.
So what have Croydon Council said?
Well, they have said that it is unacceptable, the conditions in these flats. They have apologised to Leroy and Franzoy. I can tell you that they went round 24 hours after we sent our email, 5 months after they started complaining, inspected the flats and moved them out. So Franzoy and her children and Leroy are no longer in those flats. They say they've launched an investigation into what has happened here, but there are really serious questions tonight for Croydon Council over how this was allowed to happen.
OK, Dan, thank you. Still to come, we've got a full forecast, and we hear from the capital's newest champion and the latest on Freddie the Seal. But tomorrow marks 1 year since London came to a standstill in the first national lockdown. A lot's happened since then, and our coronavirus infection rates and death rates for the capital have ebbed and flowed continuously over the past 12 months. But in Newham, they've been impacted more than most. The area recorded the highest death rate from COVID in England and Wales between March last year and February this year. So how has the borough coped? Our senior correspondent, Ronke Phillips, reports.
This queue tells its own story of the impact the pandemic has had on one of the most diverse and deprived boroughs in London.
This is all your tin stuff and your snacks.
The Newham Community Project Food Bank began last April as a small operation. It's now full-time, 5 days, serving up to 2,500 people a week.
Why do you need to come?
Because it's very helpful for me to end this situation, because I'm a student, I don't have a job.
I don't have any job, so I come regularly and it is very useful.
A lot of the people here, they're in the gig economy, so it's gonna part-time contracts or 0-hour contracts, so they'll be the first people to be laid off work, and there's no such thing as furlough for them.
Dr. Louisa Ragjakumari was a well-known and much-loved teacher at Newham's Kingswood Community School. She died of COVID on April the 17th last year. Recent concerns that a third wave of coronavirus could be on its way has left her husband and his family in a state of fear.
My daughter is freaking out, asking me about my movements every day. Where are you going? Who are you meeting? Is anyone stepping into the house? And she's paranoid. My granddaughter is paranoid. She washes her hands 20 times a day. She's germs kill my granny.
The last 12 months has also taken its toll on the local economy. Newham has a high number of small, independently owned businesses. This family-run fast food restaurant has struggled on as a takeaway, but the owners have had to let their other shops go.
Well, we are blessed in the sense that in this business, the takeaway is still running. We got 2 retail shops as well on the same street. They are closed down. They were open for a couple of months, but they are closely shut down.
Is this your first COVID vaccination?
This is my first COVID.
The focus for health professionals in Newham now is to get the population vaccinated. The area has one of the highest infection rates, but there's been a slow take-up in the borough, with only 80,000 people vaccinated so far.
Right across the community, we've got a whole range of different places where people can get vaccinated, and I'm really hopeful that we will use up as much, all of that supply that we've got going to the next phase of the vaccination programme.
It's almost a decade since the area hosted the 2012 Olympics, and a better quality of life was promised for all. Local people are hoping better times are still ahead. Ronke Phillips, ITV News.
Transport for London's accepted the government's offer to extend its bailout by 7 weeks, despite asking for a long-term deal. A £1.8 billion funding package agreed in November to keep running services was due to expire next week, but will now carry on until May the 18th. The now world champion boxer Lawrence Okolie has returned home to Hackney, where he's been greeted by excited fans and his family, of course. Saturday's was just his 16th fight. The 28-year-old knocked out opponent Krzysztof Glowatsky in the 6th round to claim the cruiserweight world title. And despite that being on just a couple of days ago, tonight he's with Antoine Allen at his boxing gym in Newham. Antoine.
Yes, I'm here with Lawrence, the boxer that everybody's talking about. He took on the world and he won his world title. I've also been joined by Robert England, the man that first trained him. Lawrence, has your success sunk in yet?
Not yet. It's still quite fresh, but I'm enjoying it.
Also, you can see that Lawrence is being cool, calm and collected. But when he went back to Hackney with his world title belt, his mother, who hadn't seen him since February 14th, Valentine's Day, had a completely different reaction.
I
cried, I screamed, I was rolling on the floor. Everybody knew, and they were, people were ringing and calling, and yeah, it's madness. It's madness. Oh boy! Ah! Yeah! And new.
And Robert, you were there when Lawrence first walked into the gym. How hard is his journey, and what was he like?
I remember the first day he came into the gym. This tall, large fella. He weighed about 120 to 124 kilos. When the night session began and training got underway, it wasn't until I carried on with the other lads that I noticed that when he put his first pair of gloves on, it wasn't until basically he started hitting the bag I noticed his jab. And yeah, it just turned my head. And I just thought from that day onwards, I knew from that day onwards how special this young man would be. And the rest of it, obviously, and he once told me that basically he had a dream, and that was to win a world title. And the dreams do come true, and that man foretells itself.
And of course, Lawrence, in 2012, you were literally working in McDonald's, watching Anthony Joshua win a gold medal at the Olympics. How pivotal has he been in your journey?
Oh, no, it's been amazing, not just on a friendship level, but just as being someone that you can look up to, see he's won world titles, unified, so it's been important.
And yesterday, we went back to Hackney, not just to see your mum, but to see your local community. How important is it for you to be a role model so other children and young people can think, I too can believe?
Well, I think it's good to be a reference, of what hard work, dedication can do, and just self-belief. So yes, it's important to me.
And of course, right now, you're Cruiserweight Champion of the World. You've just released a book. You also released a song. So what next for Lawrence Okoli?
If anyone's out there, I'd like to do some acting as well. So I'd like to be in a movie.
And what type of movies would you like?
Action, obviously, or a bit of comedy, either way.
And you did overcome bullying to get to where you are right now. So if you were to give a piece of advice to a young person who's got some struggles and some challenges, what would it be?
I think the most important things is just believe in yourself, and don't let bullies or anyone else's negative image of you affect how you feel about yourself. And once again, if you believe in yourself, anything's possible.
Now, Lawrence has movie aspirations, but he entered boxing simply to lose weight. Once he's completed, he's undisputed in the division. He's actually going to put on some more weight because one day he wants to be the heavyweight champion of the world. So hopefully he'll come back and speak to us then with some more belts to add to his collection.
Indeed. Thanks, Antoine. Don't know about Lawrence. I'd love to see his mum in a film, to be honest. And to a big boost for the Women's Super League football. The Football Association has announced a game-changing new broadcast deal that will see matches shown on Sky Sports and BBC One and Two. It's the first time the rights have been sold separately from the men's game, with the clubs in the league receiving a portion of the revenue.
Well, I think it's a day everybody has worked really hard towards. This isn't any one person or any one club or the Football Association alone. This is the sport and everybody involved with the sport, both on the pitch and off the pitch. I think they've driven a new standard.
Now, you may remember Freddie the Seal, who was spotted swimming in the Thames last week. Well, Sally's here with a bit of an update. What's happened to him since?
Well, you're right. He was swimming in the Thames, entertaining people near Hammersmith. Very sadly, over the weekend, he was attacked by a dog that was let off the lead. So we've got some pictures of him here being rescued, taken down to Tilbury Docks, and he's now with the South Essex Wildlife Hospital. Now, he's had an X-ray, but unfortunately, it's not good news. So if we take a look, you can see his injuries here. Oh, there we go. Poor little thing. So he's got a bad fracture of his flipper, and apparently the joint is dislocated as well. So they're waiting to hear back from the vets on how to proceed, and we'll keep you posted on that. But the Animal Hospital have said that dog attacks on seals, incredibly, are increasing. And so they've got this advice for people who have dogs, actually. Here we go.
They have to be kept on a lead. You know, seals are not as agile, they can't get away, and dogs just dive in and bite onto whatever bit they can get hold of. And they do a lot of damage to seals.
Sorry, well, I was going to say, we'll keep you posted on that because it's so sad, isn't it? But moving on to the weather, the clocks go forward this week, don't they? This weekend, we've already got more daylight than darkness, and we had sunshine today, and hopefully we'll see a little bit more sunshine tomorrow. So let's take a look. Here's all the details.
making the most of it whatever the weather. Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
Well, spring has sprung, time to get the lamb videos out. And I love this photo. It took me a while to realise that the reflection was on the roof of a car. Very clever, that, and a very clean car. Certainly not mine. Now, we have a few sunny spells out there tomorrow, a bit like today, although I do think tomorrow is going to be, on the whole, a little bit cloudier. But where you get that sunshine, it's just going to feel quite nice and warm. And then from Wednesday, things are going to turn considerably cloudier. Might even have a few splashes of rain out there on Wednesday and into Thursday and Friday at times. But more on that in a moment. Look, we've got high pressure out there at the moment. That is starting to edge away, and low pressure is going to become a little bit more dominant. And that's why we're just going to see a few of these fronts moving in, bringing a few bits and bobs of rain here or there, as I mentioned, but hopefully a bit of sunshine at times as well. So out there this evening, after a very pleasant day and evening, we have got some clear spells out there. So those temperatures are going to drop down tonight, really quite chilly out there, low single figures. So there might be just a touch of mist around in some areas tomorrow, a few pockets of that and a few pockets of frost as well, possibly. But tomorrow morning, despite a chilly start, they should both clear fairly quickly, hopefully with a bit of sunshine out there to start the day. Now, as I mentioned, there is a bit more cloud around tomorrow. And as we go through the day, particularly to the north and west of London, it is certainly going to cloud over a bit more, perhaps staying a bit brighter out to the southeast for that little bit longer. Temperatures fairly similar to today, highs of 14 to 15 degrees, where you get the sunshine feeling quite warm. But there is a bit more of a breeze tomorrow. Into the evening, it's staying quite cloudy, as you can see, and that sets the scene really for Wednesday. A cloudy picture, possibly with a few bits and bobs of rain, and then some sunshine and showers to end the working week, and a touch cooler by Friday as well. That's it. I'll see you later on. Cheerio.
Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
Finally tonight, if all goes to plan, we're just 3 weeks away from the pub's opening. For regulars at the Tavern in Maida Vale, the wait's been a bit longer than that. It's 6 years since developers demolished the building without permission, so they were ordered to build it back brick by brick. As Sam Holder reports, after a battle that long, there's a lot of people looking forward to a drink.
6 years ago, Maida Vale locals turned up to find their local being torn down. The owners wanted to turn the Tavern into a block of flats. They had no planning permission, but knocked it down anyway, thinking they'd get a few £1,000s fine. Instead, they were forced to rebuild it, brick by brick, window by window, stucco by stucco. The fact that it stands again is thanks to the quick thinking of local campaigners back in 2015.
We thought something might happen. We didn't believe it was going to be demolished, but we thought something might happen. And therefore we called the Historic England and asked from them to take photographs and maybe try and get it listed.
The pub was about to get Grade 2 listed status when it was bulldozed. But because every part of it had been photographed and documented by Historic England, the council was able to force the developers to rebuild it exactly as before. So what parts of the pub were particularly difficult to reinstall?
The hardest thing that I never thought would be looking so good is the stonework, the tiles, especially at the entrance, and the fireplace, as well as the original bar.
Remember, this is what it looked like before.
Well, the story of the Tavern behind me is great news for Maida Vale, but it also is very important for the wider pub community in London. We've lost 1 in 4 of our pubs in the last few years, and this shows where the community is determined and the council uses all its powers, we can fight back.
You might think the pandemic would put off potential publicans, but not Ben and Tom. Locals themselves, they've signed a 20-year lease.
People are saying that we're crazy, but it's a perfect time to open a pub from our point of view, because the timing couldn't be better for us. We've got an incredible project that we've just almost finished. The interest in here is already absolutely massive, and let alone the appetite for people to just want to get back into great pubs again.
The bookings have already started flowing in before there are even any pumps for beer to flow out. The Tavern is due to reopen on the 12th of April. A pub reborn from the rubble, a pub which sets a precedent for other property developers. Sam Holder, ITV News.
That's it from us. We're back with the latest after ITV News at 10. Coming up, it's Mary with your ITV Evening News, of course. But for me and the rest of the London team, enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.